I have some great terrible neighbor stories for you today, and you're going to love the title story too. Here's our first one. I thought we were just being paranoid. Lesson learned. Trust your gut. Posted by Wadia729. So, my husband and I thought we were just overthinking the situation, but no, we were right all along. We bought our first and current home just over 2 years ago. We were so excited to get into a house and were really looking forward to getting out of apartment living. But it has turned out to be a complete disaster. It started with the neighbors behind us. They were mowing 8 feet over the lot line, and they have a 120-pound Husky Lab and German Shepherd mix who they let out with no fence, tether, or leash. After he charged at our 4-pound puppy, the wife had to wrestle the dog to the ground, the husband just went inside, we had a fence installed. Very long story short, the fence ticked them off beyond belief because children should be able to play wherever, except never once did we see their kids out back. We thought the fence would be the end of it, but you know where this is going. Now, they ram our fence with their lawnmower whenever they can and throw trash over the fence into our property. We couldn't figure out where their hostility was coming from until I heard the wife talking to her mom or mother-in-law about us. They don't even have kids. They took that house from a family who deserves it. Just a note, our house is a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom, and is just under 1,100 square feet. This is not a home built for kids, but it's just the right fit for us, our dog, and 2 cats. We thought this was just them and not the attitude of everyone around us. But then I started hearing whispers, upper Midwest whispering that you are absolutely supposed to hear, from some neighborhood parents about the same thing. They don't have kids, they don't belong here. Again, this was like the same 3 sets of parents who all have kids the same age who play together. A few entitled parents who judge me for not being a mother is nothing new, and most parents don't give a crap if you tell them you don't have or want kids, so whatever. This goes on for a while, and we just wrote it off as a few bad eggs. Then, a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I were sniping at each other while carrying in groceries from the car. As we're putting the groceries away and laughing, the cops show up at our door. Where we live, we have very strict domestic violence laws, so usually someone gets arrested if the cops get a domestic call. It was pretty obvious that no one was at risk of anything, and I go back inside. We immediately pull up the live feed from our Ring cam and catch the cops' conversation. Officer says, yeah, this was nothing. If my neighbors called the office every time my wife and I snapped at each other, they'd be over every day. Sergeant says, this was a huge waste of our time. I'm going to go over and talk to the caller. We never should have been called. I'm so tired of coming into this neighborhood. We see the sergeant walk over across the street, and we couldn't hear what he said, but it was pretty obvious he was less than happy with the neighbors who called. The husband started shouting, "We have kids. They shouldn't have to listen to this." And the sergeant said something that shut him up and wrote a ticket, which turned out to be a ticket for a false report. We were very upset about the cops being called to our home. We knew how close we came to one of us getting arrested over nothing. We talked to our next door neighbor, who we love, and who is getting their house ready to sell. She said, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything because my ex-husband and I had issues with this same group for years, and we didn't want to get involved. But there's a group of parents who talk about you guys all the time and are working together to get you to leave. They think you shouldn't be living in this neighborhood since you don't have kids. We had issues with them because my ex-husband is black and the neighbors didn't want black kids running around the neighborhood. The cops used to be called all the time when our kids were playing outside, so the cops know about the parents on this street. Now, they write tickets every time they're called to the neighborhood, and it turns out to be nothing. We could not believe it. Confirmation that there really is a mommy mafia conspiracy that's out to get us, and they are super racist to boot. Later that day, we were on our way back to our house from a dog walk and saw the guy who called the cops on us talking to our next door neighbor, and she was flipping her crap on him. I've told you over and over to not call the cops about every little thing. I have black kids who have black friends, and the last thing I need is a dead kid because of you. You can take your BLM sign and shove it up your butt. You called over nothing. My kids could have been hurt. We don't know what to do at this point. We're surrounded by really mean, racist parents who, apparently, are going to constantly call the cops on us until they run us out. We just had an incident this morning. We caught the neighbors behind us letting their huge dog into our fenced-in yard to poop. Full-on trespassing, opened our gate, and everything. My husband went out there and he got upset with them, and all they did was go inside without their dog. They just left him in our yard. My husband came inside, called animal control, and forwarded the ring footage of them opening the gate to the same sergeant who came by our house on the domestic call. When the cops and the animal control showed up, the wife came up out back to try and sneak the dog back into the house and was caught by the cops in our yard. We don't know what happened after that and will hopefully get an update soon. Just what? This commenter has some pro advice for the OP. Says, dang, lock your gate for sure, and it sounds like you already have cameras, so that's good. If you can figure out some way to get this group to turn on one another, that would be your best bet. Get a burner phone and call on one of them saying you're one of the others in the group, or start a rumor about one spouse having an affair with one of the others. Of course, don't do that if you can just ignore them. My neighbor attempted to break into my house and got away with it, posted by Massive Formal 4870 with more info in the comments. This guy lives on the property behind my house in an RV. He has a history of snooping in windows and around properties in general from what my other neighbor says. Yesterday, he thought he was sneaking around unseen from our cameras, but we caught some of it. He came back to my house close to 10 times over 2 hours after we went to bed. He snooped around and then eventually came back with a mask and shot our guest window over 15 times with metal BBs. He also shattered our glass screen door. He spent quite a while yelling and fighting with imaginary people. Our neighbor said the guy's ex used to live in our house and thinks that she's hiding in our houses, so that's why he snoops. You can see him stalking and casing our house for days prior to this. And neighbors said she has tried to get him arrested for trespassing, but couldn't. Cops came out and took evidence and said our camera footage is not clear enough to make an arrest. They can tell it's him based off of stature, long hair, same clothes, and so on, but since the face isn't shown clearly before the mask was put on, there's nothing they can do. So ridiculous. So instead, they issued him a trespass warning, and if he comes back, he will be arrested. Now, we are stuck replacing all our broken stuff, and he is still living 10 feet off of our property and about 20 yards from our house, probably laughs at the fact that he got away with it all. This commenter asked OP, talk to a different law enforcement agency if one exists. Like, for instance, if it happened here in Houston and I got those results from the HPD, I would contact either the Harris County constables or sheriffs, then maybe the state. I say all of this because the clothes, hair, and stature of someone has been evidence enough to convict many people here in the US. And OP shares this. The sheriff is the one investigating. How would I go about opening something up with another agency? The reply is, you just walk in or contact by phone. If you have the police report, take a copy with you and your statement, along with copies of the video. The behavior days prior should have been enough for them to search his home for the mask and other clothing identified on the video. It all depends on where you are though, as laws vary. If you went to your local sheriff, they are elected officials. You can report them for not doing their job as well. This could be unsafe though, depending on where you live. Just see if you can contact the state police and go from there. And OP says, thank you, I'll do this. This commenter asked OP, how many times have robbers worn masks and somehow still got prosecuted and arrested? How much does your camera show? Does it show him walking back to his trailer? And OP tells us. I know, right? And the worst part is, in a few videos, he isn't even wearing a mask. They said they couldn't see his face clear enough to make an arrest on the spot. However, they trespassed him from my property based on my information. It makes no sense to me. The investigator will look through my evidence and hopefully they think differently than the cop and get this butthole arrested. The camera shows him coming and going from my yard and garden. He knew the camera was there and tried to avoid it as much as possible. Unfortunately, there is no camera facing him when he was shooting or throwing rocks. I did catch him acting like he was going to throw one and then he didn't and walked away. Mostly all you see is him walking around and yelling. The same guy has broken into a business across the street and stole more than $10,000 of tools. But because of his mask and bad camera quality, nothing happened. I truly don't understand. Bridezilla and her extended family destroy 70 hotel rooms, posted by Shipping My World. Who else loves Bridezilla stories? Because boy do I have one. Buckle up, because it's a long one. It includes drunken adults and minors, shoplifting, the end of at least 2 relationships, a very long visit from your friendly neighborhood police officers, a few evictions, and a crap ton of overtime for my employees. It was like we were the host of a live version of the Jerry Springer show last night. Needless to say, there's going to be an employee appreciation party very soon, since none of them walked out on me with all this crazy stuff that happened. I'm a front office manager at a hotel that has 132 rooms, and the wedding party that stayed with us last night had rented out 70 of them. But that's not all. We also had not 1, but 2 school sports teams in the house, renting a combined total of 30 rooms. Needless to say, our hotel was very well bursting at the seams, especially since each group wanted to be as far away from the other as possible, and we had to pack regular travelers between them all. Party hardy, am I right? Hindsight is 2020, and we should have realized that we were in for a crap storm 2 days ago. Bridezilla, her groom King Kong, and the wedding party of monsters all checked in then. The men checked into one of our largest suites for a bachelor party, while the women checked into another for their bachelorette party. We fully expected the men to cause a riot because they were hauling in beer literally by the keg. In reality, Bridezilla and her Bridezilla maids were the ones that went on a rampage. Not only did they tally up a total of 3 noise complaints, the 4th one gets you evicted, and over $100 worth of pantry charges, but they also paid a group of kids $20 each to run up and down the hallways. I can only suspect it was because they meant to use the kids as a distraction from their own roughhousing. The employee on duty that night said a guest came down to report that they thought the room was being used to film a Girls Gone Wild video. But the sun eventually set, and I came in to work my morning shift the next day. I stupidly didn't see all the red flags sailing right in front of my face. Less than 15 minutes into my shift, Bridezilla's maid of honor comes down. She sees that I'm standing behind the desk and wearing a name tag, so she rightfully treats me like I'm not a human being. Because as we all know, people that work in customer service are just robots in cheap flesh suits. Beep boop. She chews me out a little bit for my employees' despicable behavior last night towards herself and her best friends. I run through my programming and run apologize template 012 and say, we're sorry to have made her feel disrespected and insulted, but inform her that her room had multiple noise complaints against it. We're very strict on our noise policy, ma'am, I told her. You aren't the only guest in the hotel, and if you cannot be courteous to our other guests, we'll kindly ask that you seek other accommodations. Bridezilla's maid of honor didn't like that. She said, well, it's just my opinion, but as someone who's part of a wedding that brought your hotel more than 60 rooms worth of business, I think you guys should be a little more lenient with the rules for us. Unfortunately, my SAS module was not installed at the time due to a lack of sleep, so instead of going Minnesota nice on her, I told her, we're trying to provide a consistent experience to all guests. I know you guys are throwing a party and it's a happy time for many of you, but we cannot bend on our noise policy. After that exchange, she has a list of people arriving today that she wants me to assign to specific rooms because I have to make sure certain people aren't rooming too close together. Some of them have cheated on the other ones, but they promise to behave themselves if they don't have to look at each other. Now, I may just be a simple robot that cannot consume liquid beverages, but in my opinion, I don't believe excess and alcohol mix well. Maid of honor also asked for housekeeping to come up ASAP to clean their trashed room because they're going to use it as a prep room for the wedding. The housekeeping executive doesn't even show up for another hour, and I refuse to leave the desk to spend time cleaning their room. I told her she'd have to wait a bit before someone came in, to which she again offered her opinion and said, I really think a hotel this big should have someone always on duty for stuff like this. By now it's 9 a.m., basically dawn of the second day, and would you believe it, people for the wedding are already showing up to check in. It's wonderful that all these people are so punctual that they're an entire 6 hours early just so they aren't late. Graciously, we were not full the previous night, so I allowed them all to check into rooms as they showed up. But you want to know what I honestly thought? They all look like clones of that woman from the That Is My Opinion gif that I keep referencing, and I did not want to test how well my eardrums could stand up to a whole choir of sirens. The small highlight to the busy morning is that there was a professional that came in and did the hair for all the kids involved in the wedding party. She did up flowers in all the girls' hair, and they looked effing adorable running through the breakfast area and were so excited to show off their new dresses to anyone that walked past them. I hope Bridezilla doesn't influence those kids' behavior too much. The rest of the morning passes by in a flash. I'd done at least 40 of the 75 arrivals that we had for the day. The PM shift arrives, and I catch her up to speed and offer to stay late with her. I expected it to be just as crazy until the wedding starts at 5. She declines and says she'll be fine. A response in which she tells me she regretted in a text message later that night. At 5 o'clock, she had a line of people out the door. All of them are a part of the wedding group and screaming at her because they're now late for the wedding. More than 5 women were demanding that she give them keys so they could change in the rooms without having them bother with trivial things like payment or signatures. She was a trooper and stood her ground, asking all of them to wait their turn to check in. My houseman on duty even offered to help her if she signed into the second computer for him, but that small ray of hope was quickly squashed. A mother on the 3rd floor called down to inform us that her son had swallowed a large quantity of pool water. The pool water upset his stomach, and he ended up vomiting all over the elevator and 3rd floor. The very same floor that the wedding party was pre-assigned and checking into. So he had to go deal with that. Once that rush was over with, all was quiet for a few peaceful hours. Then it was time for the shuttle to pick them up. Weddings usually all follow the same pattern. They ask for shuttle service from 8 p.m. until 1 a.m. Happy to pay our outlandish fee for private use of the shuttle. Then, no one bothers to use it until 11 p.m., at which point the alcohol makes them view the shuttle as a clown car, and they all believe they've joined the circus. Tonight followed the same pattern, with only one exception. At 8:30, the driver had a single woman ride it back to the hotel, sobbing her eyes out. She told him that she saw her fiancé making out with her cousin behind the reception hall and couldn't believe it. He tries to offer her comforting words on the way back, but I'm told it was an all-around awkward 15-minute ride. When she gets back to the hotel, she demanded of the desk that we take her card off file and make her ex-fiancé pay. Except we don't, because we need him to come down and slide his card. The chances of that happening were slim to none. So, as my shuttle driver was busy acting as the Ronald McDonald clown bus, stuffing close to triple the legal capacity into it, since not a single one of them bothered listening to him, I'm sure you all have one burning question on mind. What about those sports teams? Have they caused any problems? Can you guess the answer? If you guessed yes, then you're right. One of the 2 teams had rented out a conference room to have a pizza party in. They were informed several times they only had the room from 5 p.m. until 9 p.m. And after the children stuffed themselves full of pizza, they ran off to use the swimming pool. And as I'm sure you're all aware, global law states that if you're at a hotel for your kid's sports event, you are legally allowed to get completely wasted. And I mean absolutely crap-faced. At that point, the hotel staff is supposed to babysit your gremlins so you can party like you're 21 again. Isn't that swell? So, our houseman is trying to get the kids to behave themselves and stay quiet in the pool while the front desk is threatening to evict the parents. Because it's now 10:30 and Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus is being blasted from the conference room and can be heard throughout every inch of the hotel. Meanwhile, the one singular mother that was being responsible stopped by the desk with about 20 bottles of Diet Coke and her son. Apparently, our vending machine is broken on the 2nd floor. She said that her son put in the money and then proceeded to press the button 100 times while waiting for his soda. And he must have the strategy guide for that vending machine downloaded to his phone because he knew just the right amount of times to push the button so that the machine would continue spitting out pops. The son did it about 2 more times before the mother realized you couldn't buy 20 pops with only $5 and forced him to bring them all back down to the desk and apologize for stealing them. The other parents back in the conference room had been waving off the front desk threats until we finally got a lucky break. The night audit came in a half hour early because the weather was bad and she didn't want to be late. My night auditor has plenty of years under her belt and has seen far worse. She called the police within seconds of walking in and informed the sports parents that she was doing so. When the police arrived, the parents had all belligerently returned to their rooms, and my PM desk shift was able to go home after that stressful day of work. But that's when the real fun starts. The officers got called away only a few minutes after arriving, but we know exactly where they went after that. They actually got called to the reception hall where the wedding was being held. Apparently, they needed to shut down the bar because the parents were buying drinks for the kids who were 18 to 20. Plus, one of the kids that was drinking became heavily intoxicated, stole the keys to his mother's car from her purse, and crashed it into another car in the parking lot. The kid was fine, but probably suffered a wicked hangover this morning. The reception hall had called the police to kick them all out, and that's when they became our problem again. See, the driver, who should have still had pickups at 12, 12:30, and 1, now had to pick them all up at 12. There were at least 35 people cramming into the bus, each of which was holding a beer glass with at least half a pint of beer in it. He put his foot down then, turned off the shuttle, and told them they weren't allowed to have open alcoholic beverages while in a vehicle, and would not drive them back until they all disposed of them. Oh, needless to say, it didn't go over well. None of them listened to him and just berated him to bring them back because it was cold. One of the officers on site came over and told the driver that they'd be willing to escort him back and would overlook the many passengers and their open alcohol, just so they could get these people inside. So, when the shuttle and the police entourage showed up at the hotel a half hour later, it was like unleashing Pandora's box upon the building. 4 officers even stayed around to help the night audit deal with all the drunk and disorderly because there were a lot of complaints. The first thing that happened was that someone was complaining about a room on the first floor. Someone was attempting to do an amateur remake of 50 Shades of Grey, and were not being subtle about it. Then there was screaming and yelling and the breaking of lamps. Remember that cousin that broke up someone's relationship earlier? Well, she apparently had a fiance of her own, and while she was doing the nasty with another man, her drunken fiance walked in on them. It didn't end well, and we had to evict all 3 of them. Meanwhile, on the 3rd floor, Girls Gone Wild had resumed in full force. The night audit went up with one of the officers to tell the group that this was their final warning before they were evicted from the hotel as well. While she was doing so, a man in the room across the hall opened his door to yell at the night audit. His exact words were, "Why are you dragging me out of bed? Do something about this dang noise." Before the officer, that I presume the old man didn't see, could say anything, the night audit spun on him and said, "You got out of your bed of your own volition, sir. We're dealing with this situation." It's all the same song and dance for the next few hours. People call to complain, the audit and the officers deal with it, and eventually everyone slips into sleep. Now, please read slips into sleep as become blackout drunk and passed out. Apparently, the officers were having a slow night, and 2 of them stayed until the night audit was done since she didn't feel safe on her own. My houseman stayed until 3 a.m. to help the night audit with moral support and cleaning the hallways because they were trashed with a capital T. We don't know what 310 was doing in their room at 4 in the morning, but 210 swears all the way to Sunday that they were practicing an Irish gig and falling. There was a lot of falling. But the crazy thing is, when the audit got up to the room, the entire floor was silent. Towards the end of the evening, a man comes down to our pantry, takes an armful of random items, and starts walking away. He's clearly drunk because the officers watched him bewilderingly, and the night audit calls out, asking if the man would like to charge his items to his room. Said man must have actually been 3 deer in a trench coat because he sprinted off the second she asked. An officer caught him, but he was so drunk that our night audit took pity and said that we wouldn't press charges and asked to just escort him back to the room. And now today, I come in at 7 a.m. and am caught up to speed. I'll tell you, seeing a cop standing around the front desk does not do my heart any good. If I have to come in and see a cop, I fully expect them to be there because someone got murdered. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. And then, I hear it. The drunken heavy stomps down the staircase, the screaming agony of a stomach demanding food above alcohol, and Bridezilla descends into the lobby with a hunger that can only be satiated by screaming at the front office manager. So I take it, listening to her scream and demand that everyone in her party be refunded. All 70 rooms. She can't believe that we had the audacity to call the cops on her friends and family. "It's a wedding," she shouts over and over. "We're supposed to have fun, not be treated like a bunch of dogs." I really didn't want to deal with her BS, so I told her, Ma'am, you must keep it down, or else I will have to call the cops back. Our employees were verbally threatened by some of your guests last night and did not feel safe. I wanted to say that if they didn't want to be treated like dogs, they shouldn't act like dogs then. But I felt that may be a little too unprofessional and couldn't override my own programming. So the wedding party began to check out, but not before they trashed breakfast. There was food dropped, coffee spilled, and my 2 breakfast attendants swear it was done on purpose. When they were cleaning up, some spilled coffee, a bridesmaid knocked over another cup of coffee, and they all snickered at them. What is this, Mean Girls 2? And that is my tale of Bridezilla. I've already gotten 2 emails from our guest relations department saying that there have been complaints opened up against us about employee behavior last night, but they're both from members of the wedding party, so all I have to do is submit a copy of the police report and I think we'll be good. I pray that all of you will never have to deal with bridezillas of your own. And if you do, Godspeed and good luck. Psycho Karen demands my house and sues me. Jail time for her with updates. Click the video on your screen. You don't want to miss this insane story, and I'll see you there.